And we are live here in the Storycraft Cafe. I am Hank Garner, your host and your story barista, as always. Joining me tonight, Josh Hayes, Lauren Moore, Ian Garner, and Amy Hale. We're not able to make it tonight. They are still plugging away at the challenge, but life stuff came up and they couldn't join us tonight. So tonight it's going to be me, Josh, and Lauren, and reposition myself for the camera. How's it going, guys?
Fantabulous.
Going good. I went to a retreat in the mountains of Virginia and met a whole lot of new friends and might have had a little run-in with some of the leaves and the mold and have a little like allergy stuff going on. So kind of pardon for that. But had a really good time and spent 10 hours in the car with my sister, and we talked about life and we talked about the shows we've been watching and and a little bit about book. So I've got some ideas going, and I'm excited to talk about characters today with everyone.
Nice.
10 hours in the car with my sister. Anyway, that's that would be. I don't have a twin like Josh, though.
I couldn't do it either. The only person I could do 10 hours in the car with is myself. That's it. I could not do anybody else.
Well, Lauren, like you said, we have had a horrible drought this late summer, which means that our normal rain that washes away all the pollen and stuff has been non-existent. So my allergies are going crazy. So I'm going to be eating on a cough drop from time to time to keep from coughing in everybody's ear. Yep. Anyway, so last week we talked, Jacob from Dabble joined us, and we talked about plotting and the specific plot tools that Dabble provides, and I think we all got some great insight into that. And Josh, I know that you finished up your previous project, which then freed you up to start working on this project this week, and you shared a picture with us this morning where you were at it with the plot grid, and you were using the color-coded banners and the whole
I'm in it.
How's it going?
It's great. Yeah, I finished book one. The first draft came out to about 130,000 words ish.
It's a little bigger than you were shooting for, isn't it?
Yeah, I was shooting for 100, and
I thought you were shooting for like 120.
No, it's actually a running joke between me and Chris Kennedy, and every time I'm in one of his anthologies, there's a hard cap at 10,000 for the words. I always go over the hard cap, always. I don't think I've ever given him a story that's under like 11,000 or 12,000 words. I was aiming for 100,000. It's about 135. It may stretch to 140 depending on I can, if that's something they want to do. I can't show that later. I can. Finish that on. Did I finish that on Friday? No, I can't remember. Maybe it was Monday. I think I finished it on Monday. And so I took Tuesday off, and then today I've been just grinding out plot ideas for book two, kind of doing that little breather on the first book. It's my drafts, story wise and character wise, are usually right on, and so the editing comes down to all of my I can't spell for half of nothing, and I have a horrible problem of thinking a word. Like for instance, if I think about, I will type above, but I will see about. And I don't catch that until I go back in. And sometimes I catch it right away, and sometimes I don't. And I don't have any idea why I do that. It's just been a problem of mine forever. So a lot of my editing comes from copy and just making sure that the right word is there. I spent, I don't know, 3-4 hours today going through. I think I got the first 12 chapters planned and outlined. It's sitting the amount of words in the planning doc right now are about 4,000, and for 12,000 or for 12 chapters. So that's where I'm sitting at right now.
Talk about writing the wrong word. I'm dyslexic, and that manifests itself in different ways with different people. Some, you think dyslexia, you just jumble letters up, and sometimes it's like that, but sometimes it's. I was making a graphic the other day for an upcoming show that we're doing, and I always put Eastern time and Pacific time, and then the people in the middle, like us, can figure out where they fall
Right.
depending on those two. And
Right.
I completely reversed them, and I didn't notice it at all until a week later. And I was like,
Mhm.
well, why is Pacific time after Eastern time? That doesn't make sense. And I just reversed them. And so I feel your pain about, thinking one thing, doing another,
Right.
and just not picking up on it until, somebody calls you out on it.
Fortunately, I
Mhm.
know that it's a problem of mine.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of times when I go through edits, I'll have all of my chapters in separate documents. And as I'm going through uh, what I call my edit, is I mark my progress by how many chapters I'm pulling over into the main manuscript file. And so I use Pro Writing Aid on a single Word document, and I go through that and find everything wrong in that. And then I change the font and do it again. And then I bring it over to my manuscript file. So by the time everything's together, I've gone through it about 3 or 4 times.
That's the great
All right. I
thing.
know we weren't talking about editing. I just went
Yeah.
on a roll.
Hey, I'm loving this. As the editor, I wrote a novel, and I think there were 2 editors who were helping me with that novel, and Richard Fox. So I think between the 3 of us, that novel got edited like 7 times. And then when I got it back after all of that, I was still finding more
Oh,
errors that
they're
had slipped
everywhere.
through. You
Right.
pop on Pro Writing Aid, it like claims to find 400 errors, and you click through each one, and you still find 20 or 30 just left over. They're just kind of there. So,
I
get it.
had one error in a short story that I had published by Bain in the Battle Luna anthology,
Mhm.
and in the first sentence there was a error in the paper. I don't think it's in my paperback copy, but I know specifically in the hardback copy that I signed in Barnes and Noble,
Oh
I
no.
opened it up and looked at my first chapter and I go, "That's not the right word." I see
Lauren,
that
as an
Sam saying that Pro Writing Aid works in Dabble. That's awesome. I'll have to check that out.
yes, it's if you look in your right hand bar, you can turn Pro Writing Aid off and on there for
Sweet.
sure. Lauren, as an editor who writes, having an editor look at your work, do you take personal offense at that?
No, I love it.
Do you?
And it was such a revelation to me, for me, that me as an author, I'd really enjoy and someone else coming in and showing me all the problems so I can fix them, and how much I felt like it was a relief. As an editor, before I had that experience, I just kind of had this assumption that, an author's manuscript, it's like their baby. It's very precious to them. I got to be very careful when I give my feedback to them to not like step on their toes, and I had some stress about that, with the going back and forth. But then to actually be on the other side of the table, and to feel such incredible relief when Ellen Campbell found mistakes, fixed them, and made suggestions. When Ellen Campbell wrote a comment on my manuscript and asked if I was high when I wrote that, and I really wasn't. Okay, I really was not high when I wrote that. I was just writing, and getting in the zone and just
That's
writing.
amazing.
And I took her suggestions. Some of them I agreed with, some of them I didn't, and the ones when I didn't agree with her, that was fine too. So I felt like it was a relief, and I hope that other authors feel that way, that we're on the same team just to make the book better, right? And if we agree, great, and if not, that's fine too. It's still the author's book, and it's their responsibility, and they make the final call.
If you've never
Indeed.
been edited by Ellen Campbell and received some of her snarky comments in there, you don't know what you're missing.
It's a delight. It's a delight.
One of the short stories she edited for me,
All
one of
stories
the
are short for Ellen.
yeah, one of the reoccurring phrases was "the tide comes in and the tide comes out," and in every instance of the word "tide," she put Roll Tide in the comments, and or some variation of Roll Tide and all that stuff. And yeah, it was great.
Alabama fans, what are you gonna do with them?
What are you gonna do?
Die
What are you
hard.
gonna do with them, man? So last week we started talking about plotting out our stories, and this week I want to talk a little bit about character development. And you can have an amazing plot. You can think of all sorts of things that your story is going to do, but until you have someone to do those things to, you don't have a story. So what do you have a philosophy about building characters and making characters that readers care about? Josh, do you like what and let me qualify that a little broader. Um, do you think about stories in terms of main character and then people that support that main character, like the main character as the person that the plot is going to happen to, and then a supporting cast? Do you think about a group of people, and then this is a place where they're going to live, and because of the people and the place, stuff happens? Like, how do you start thinking about populating a plot with people?
Well, first for me is always the story idea or the plot and the characters. They're not secondary, but I work them almost last.
Okay.
Because the characters for me are almost the easiest thing to do in my writing. Because I love characters. I love unique characters. I like doing silly things with them that make them stand out, and make them different. For instance, one of the side characters in the book says "my guy" like all the time, and it's I don't do that with all the characters, but I like finding little things that little twerk like I don't know, the word is slipping me, but little things that everybody does that they don't know that they do, but everybody else is like they do that all the time. And so I try to find stuff like that is interesting and add that to the character. But also a lot of who the character is comes out in the writing. And that's, for me, that's very hard to plan ahead of time. For instance, with the characters I'm writing with this book, one is a soldier, one is a spy, and one is basically what amounts to a computer hacker. But she really only does that to survive. She's not malicious with it. Her and her grandfather have just been kind of bouncing around from place to place, just surviving basically. And in doing that, she has done a lot of things to herself, because of the way that the system works. They have a lot of implants and a lot of like just things that they can access computer systems with implants in their mind, and there's virtual interfaces and all that stuff. Well, she's taken that to the next level because she is good at that, and so she's just ramped up everything in her body that can make that better. And so it's interesting exploring what that does to a character and how they interact with everybody else, because their life is digital. Like that's where she lives at, and she has never had friends. And so now going into like friends other than her grandfather, and now she's going into the second book, and I actually have a section where her and her grandfather are talking about, do we stay or do we leave? Because this is outside of our comfort zone. We're not used to working with other people. We don't know, like, can we trust them? Do they have our best interests at heart? And so that kind of stuff, I lay the seeds for that. And then I make sure that I fill almost all of their scenes with something touching that, so it grows their character through the story.
What about you, Lauren? How are you feeling about the people that are going to be in your story?
Yeah, I did something similar with the first book I wrote. Is I started with the plot, and that novel was a mail order bride romance. So I know there are certain tropes that I have to
What other
have.
kind of romance is there?
True.
There are certain tropes that I have to have, and like there's certain stages to that journey, and that kind of necessitates certain kinds of characters. So with the same thing with the plot that I'm working on now is it's going to be a fortress under siege kind of story. So I'm going to need to have defenders. I'm going to need to have like a ragtag group that initially, doesn't get along or maybe doesn't understand each other, but through being attacked, they're going to have to band together and learn to rely on each other. So I know that they're going to be pretty diverse, right? I know I'm going to need comic relief because it's going to get dark, right? I know I'm going to need some really big bad villains that are going to have to kind of get worse and worse over time. It's going to have to be like the second book in the Lord of the Rings series. This is gonna get dark. We need to have comic relief. So I'll think about my story and what it needs as a whole, and then start putting those pieces together. Still, as a writer, when I think about my characters, I've got a pretty much blank slate, and I, can be little like, well, where do I go from here? I was an English teacher, and I'm finding that as a writer, a lot of the stuff I taught as an English teacher actually has use. Those things weren't just terms, they were tools, and now I'm using them. Like, as an English teacher, I taught my students that some characters are flat, right? They only have one side to their personality. And some characters are round and they have multiple sides too. Okay. So I might have my main characters are going to be round. Yeah, right. They're going to have multiple sides to them. They're going to also change over time. But I will need lots of side characters that I just don't have time to kind of like flesh out all the different sides to them. So they might be like, Eeyore in Winnie the Pooh, who, kind of has one main kind of side to him that comes up, okay, and kind of depressed and down. Well, he's got multiple sides too. But my characters can have just one side of them. My main characters also are going to change over time, right? We want to have that character arc. So I got to be thinking about who is my main character at the start, what flaws do they have, what weaknesses do they have, and then what is the big change that I want to see over time for them as a result of the conflict. Maybe they've got weaknesses that'll later become strengths. And at the beginning, it's dragging them down, but later on, it could be the key to unlocking the whole thing. So those characters are dynamic versus characters that are static that don't change. So my villain, he might be static and he might not change by the end, or he could be dynamic too. He could have a redemption arc, or he could get worse. There's all kinds of changes that someone could make, but there's room in my plot and in my cast of characters for both round and flat characters, dynamic and static. And just thinking about those terms could start helping me to color out that cast.
Yeah.
So I have this question, and it was a perfect segue to this question that I wanted to pitch to you guys. And I'm thinking about this in my story. You traditionally are going to have a protagonist, and then for the protagonist to have a great story arc, you need an antagonist. You need someone to put obstacles in your protagonist's way, or to provide conflict. If and Lauren, I know the book you're writing is in the Forgotten Ruin world, which is kind of Army Rangers in a Tolkien-esque world. The portal fantasy, if you will. One of the one of the things that I hear discussed about Tolkien-esque fantasy, especially, is that it's a purely good versus evil story, and the white versus black. And now the story du jour, that the people love to paint in shades of gray. It's the stark white versus black, good versus evil are not as in vogue as they once were. And maybe there's something to be said for giving your antagonist motivation as well as your protagonist, and to give a why to the evil. Sometimes evil's just evil, and there's not anything we can do about it, but sometimes there is a story behind the evil, and being able to bring out some of that gives depth to that character. How do you guys feel about evil for evil's sake versus giving motivation to an antagonist?
Lauren, go ahead.
Well, even Tolkien would say that there's darkness in every soul, and the light can reach through the deepest, darkest darkness there is. You look at Gollum, and he really did have a struggle. There was
Yeah.
potential for redemption for Gollum, and in the end, he just couldn't overcome his greed. But there were moments when hope and repentance was kind of awakening in him. And similarly, Frodo, he struggled against the pull of the ring and power, and he was slipping. He needed Sam to carry him through at the end there. He needed his best friend there to be sacrificial. So in our stories too, we can go ahead and show that this conflict is real, even for our main character. We don't want a main character who's a Molly Sue. That's the name, right? Who's just does everything right all the time. That's not realistic, believable, relatable, fun to read, because we all have those struggles in ourselves, and we understand them and we connect with them. And the point is that your characters connect with the reader, and they can get lost in that story. So I think if your villain also has more complexity to them, and even complexity in the moral realm too, that'll be fascinating to the reader, and it'll give you some room to play with bigger themes and bigger ideas, and kind of explore what's driving you to write the book in the first place that you might not even be aware of until you're like partway through some scene, and you're just struck with this like brilliant idea, and you're like, where did that come from? And I guess it's just kind of, maybe it's your subconscious speaking through you, maybe it's been you the whole time, but you might have that moment of realization when you've been stuck in this chapter, and suddenly you come up with an idea, and you're like, wow, that was in there the whole time, and brilliant, keep going. Those are the kind of moments that writer lives for, and also the reader really enjoys on their side of it too. And Josh, I can see you've had that too. You've had that moment too.
Oh yeah, I've had plenty, and most of them by accident. But I think the idea of like evil for evil's sake, like a Sauron character, that it does serve a purpose. Whenever I start to write my antagonists, and typically I have many, and I have antagonists on different levels. I don't know that I've written a book that the antagonist is like a Dark Lord figure, where it's just one person that they're trying to fight against. Usually the antagonists happen on different levels for different reasons, but usually they're all connected. But I always want to know why. Why are they doing that? And what is their end game? Because it's not just it's A, B, and C. No one sets out to just do A. There's always other things involved. And so when I'm writing an antagonist, I need to know what those other things are. And even if they don't make it into the book, just so I understand what the antagonist is trying to do. And I really, really like writing antagonists who don't come across as an evil mustache twirling villain. I love writing villains that sometimes don't even realize they're the villain until you get to a certain point and they're like, oh damn. So I really like to do layered villains. Are my favorite. I really, really enjoy villains. Sometimes more than my main characters. I've got a book that I'm hopefully going to write next year, that one of the main characters that we follow, it's going to be hopefully a trilogy, but one of the main characters that we follow for those 3 books, at the end of the second book, is going to we're going to see that he's wrong, and he's been wrong the whole time, but he's going to continue on his path. So he's going to go from who we are following as a protagonist through the entire book or through the entire series, and he will become the antagonist later, but he never changes. He's completely the same all the way through, and he is a staunch believer in what he's doing, and that doesn't change, but he becomes an antagonist in book 3. And I'm really excited to write that, because I think that holding to your beliefs and becoming the bad guy is something that a lot of people don't see happening in themselves, but they see it happening in a lot of other people. And I wanted to explore that really deeply with this character.
What's the saying? How does it go? That everyone is the hero in their own story.
Yeah.
So that, what better way to portray an antagonist as truly believing that they're doing the right thing, or who's the big bad in Marvel Endgame?
Thanos.
Thanos thought he was doing a noble,
for sure,
decent thing.
Yeah.
He just couldn't see the error of his ways. And
right.
That's in a lot of ways, that's a more terrifying antagonist.
For sure. Yeah.
When they feel like they're on the side of justice and right, that's more scary.
Yeah.
I'm writing a mystery, and it's going to be a murder mystery. So someone will die. So now working out motivations for the reasoning for the dead body, but then also the red herrings and the misdirections. That's what I'm having a lot of fun with right now, is setting up people that act squirrely but are not guilty of this thing. How do you put roadblocks in people's way that they're not necessarily doing the right thing, but they're not guilty of this thing.
Right.
So that's what I'm having a lot of fun with right now.
Yeah, because as a mystery writer, you've got to plant clues.
Yes.
So that when the reader gets to the end of the book, either they're good enough clue finder that they could have picked up the clues and put it all together, which I don't know if I've ever managed to do. But some detective readers can, and you should at least have the feeling that if you were more careful, you could have done it. So then how do you arrange all of that as a writer? Well, first you got to think of it all up first.
Yeah.
And
that's
that's
why
the
you need
fun
a plot grid.
Yeah.
So the best thing, one of the most enjoyable things that I have as a reader, or as a movie watcher or something, is to get to the end of a story, the big reveal, the big twist, whatever it is, where you clue the reader into what's going on, and then you immediately start rewinding back and replaying all the scenes and looking for all the clues that you missed. That is the best part to me. So that's what I'm having a real fun time with right now.
I'm on my 4th read through of Pandora's Star, the Commonwealth Saga by Peter F. Hamilton. It's a fantastic book. If you like space opera, and you haven't read this book, then you don't like space opera, because this book is the quintessential space, in my opinion, number 1 at the top of my list for space opera. Pandora's Star and Judas Unchained. It's 2-book set, and I've read it 4 times. They're super long. But there's a murder investigation going on in the book. And in my mind, even after reading it 4 times, in my mind, I'm like, yes, I know who did it. But I always forget how he got away with it. And, and then we get to this scene, and the investigator, she has this kind of light bulb moment. But we see, and sometimes we experience her POV, but at this particular chapter, it's from somebody else's POV, and you can see her have the light bulb. You can see her go, I know why, but she doesn't tell him, because they're getting ready to go into court and do their thing. And in court, spoiler alert if you haven't read it, it doesn't ruin a whole bunch, but basically he planned everything correct. He would have got away with everything, but he packed up only her stuff. And the only person that would know exactly what was hers and what was his was him.
Oh.
Because they tried to play it off as maybe they just went away or maybe they got mugged in a business somewhere. But the only person that would know that it was her stuff was the guy. And every time it hits me. And that doesn't really affect the story as a whole. That's just a very slim portion of it. But when you said that, it's what I thought of.
I just looked it up and I posted a link in the chat there.
Oh, yeah.
Peter F. Hamilton. I don't think that I've ever read that.
Oh God, we've had him on KSM a couple times, and he's a fantastic author.
Well,
And you wrote the foreword to one of our anthologies too. Very kind.
Oh, that's true.
I just sent it to my Kindle, so I'll
Nice.
dig into that tonight for sure.
I wonder if, as an author, you come up with that idea, like maybe you're packing with your wife or something, and you come up with that idea, and like just that one little thing is like the tip off for the whole plot.
Yeah.
And it's that same thing with like characters, figuring out who your characters are. You just start digging a little bit and just keep on digging, and it just gives you more ideas that build and compound on each other.
For sure.
Well, I was trying to figure out who said this quote. I've heard variations of this quote a lot. Plot is character and character is plot, because as soon as a character takes a meaningful action, his action is driving your plot, whether you like it or not. So in a lot of ways, you can't separate the two, because one drives the other, and then the other, drives the first one, and it becomes a circle that just feeds itself, because people do things, and things happen to people, and so.
Well, and that's part of my Horcrux in plotting first and doing character second, because then I get down a rabbit hole with character, and I'm like, this character wouldn't do that. And then I've got to like go back and figure out, okay, how do we get back around to this? Because that's where I need to be over there.
So I thought of a fun exercise, and I made up this this little PowerPoint today, and where I have some characters from pop fiction that I thought would be fun to F. Scott Fitzgerald said that. Keo said, thank you for that. Superman is one of these characters that a lot of people love to pile on, because he's a Mary Sue in a lot of ways, where it's kind of the perfect character, and there's no foil to him. There is, but he's kind of the guy that can just do anything. But I like to think of Superman in the terms of, is it a nature or a nurture story? Is Superman good because he's good, because he's an alien who comes from another planet, and because he has these seemingly limitless powers? Or is he good because he was raised by Pa Kent in the Midwest, and with hardworking Midwestern values, and as a lover of humanity? Is that what makes him great, or do his superpowers make him great? What do you guys think about this character, and what makes Superman such an iconic character that's lasted for 80 years?
As a not a huge fan of Superman, only because of his superpowers, because it really does, in my opinion, diminish the kind of story you can tell. But I'm on the nurture side of this, because there's obviously people that are from his planet that are completely different from him. And I've never seen the Christopher Reeves movies. I've only seen the first, maybe the second one of, who is the guy that just did it?
The British guy. Yeah.
Yeah, the one that the fight at the end of the movie ruined the entire city, but they
Right,
won
right.
still.
Is that
I've only
Superman versus Batman? That one.
I
Yeah,
have
the
seen.
Justice
I think I
League.
have seen that one too. But there's just once you get past his childhood and even some of his interpersonal relationships with like Lois and stuff like that, there's really not anything. Like all it is just blowing stuff up at that point. Like there's not a lot of character that goes into that, until Kryptonite and all that stuff. Yeah. But
Yeah.
still, so I'd have to go for nurture on this, just the way it was raised. Being from the Midwest myself, I can wholeheartedly attest to that.
Yeah, I tend to think that Superman is more of a story of nurture. That it's, yes, this character with seemingly limitless powers, but he's anchored to his humanity by the people he was raised by and the place where he was raised. And I think that's the story of Superman that a lot of comic writers and movie writers just don't seem to get. I think that's the real power of that character.
For the nature side, though,
Yeah.
his personality is a big piece of it too. Like he's a humble guy, and that's kind of part of his allure. I don't know, mystique is that he's just he tries to stay out of the spotlight as Clark Kent. He tries to he's hiding his powers kind of underneath his outer shell, and he's very compassionate and respectful. He's the kind of guy who listens first and then talks later. And that's why he makes a lot of the choices willing to like throw himself out there and be self-sacrificial and just kind of rush in to save the day is because of his personality. So which has been raised by his parents, right? So I'd say both are there. And also I think he's a good icon for like what makes a good man. He's someone who's humble, hardworking. He puts others first. He's self-sacrificial. He's a hero, right?
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to claim the spotlight, but he's got weaknesses, right? With that kryptonite's there, he just becomes the weakest thing. And still, even though kryptonite exists and his enemies can use it, he still throws himself into the battle. So I love both of that.
Yeah, I think I agree with Leo. Superman's the character. Clark Kent is the alter ego or the mask that he wears. Moving on, Sarah Connor from the Terminator series. Sarah probably has one of the biggest character arcs of any character that I've ever seen, from a timid character in the beginning to almost crazy in the end in her single focus and purpose. What do you guys think about this character?
Lauren, you want to go with this from first? Or I can go first. I just went first last time, so I didn't want to step all over you.
To be honest, I don't remember the Terminator movie so well.
All right, I'll take this one because Terminator 2 just happens to be one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yes.
As it should be for everyone.
As it should be. I will say that I think Sarah Connor and Ellen Ripley are like right here when it comes to meek and don't have any idea what they're doing. And then in Aliens, then she's all about it. And she's like, stop screwing around, guys. Let's do what we need to do. Sarah Connor, though, I think, and really, I only encompass the Terminator story as Terminator and Terminator 2. Everything else is fan fiction to me. So the devotion to the idea that Reese gave her and her experience in the first one created what she is in the second one. And it's impossible to see her become anything else. And I love that she was able to take this character. And of course she sounds crazy. Of course she acts like the way she acts because she knows without a doubt this is going to happen. And what happens to somebody when everyone tells you you're a liar or you're just imagining it, and you don't know what you're talking about. And on top of that, know that your son is in mortal danger. Like, what kind of mental stress would that put on a person? And I thought that she did that very well. She held herself under extreme circumstances, and man, the growth from riding her scooter down the street, looking around like nobody's business, to shooting a flying helicopter out of the back of an armored police vehicle is a legit character arc. Like, I am down with Sarah Connor.
All right. Next up, Harry Potter with Hermione and Ron. Also, Harry Potter uses a number of character tropes. We've got the trope of the orphan, the chosen one, the orphan who doesn't know he's the chosen one, and then it becomes revealed to him through a relationship with a mentor. That's another kind of archetypal character in Dumbledore. I had this conversation with my 18-year-old son Noah today. We were talking about what makes Harry Potter a great character, because on the surface, this character has a ton of flaws. Some of them are inherent or inherited flaws because of his life circumstance, and he just kind of didn't have any other choice. He didn't choose to be raised by his aunt and her family the way he was. He didn't choose to be abused in a lot of ways like that. But also, at some point he has to take responsibility for his own actions, and he kind of grows into the young man that he becomes. But then he has, Hermione and Ron, his best friends. Hermione is probably the much better wizard or witch than he is. She's better at magic than he is, for sure. Yet he's the one who gets the spotlight, and even though she's much better at it than he is. And then Ron is the one who is a pureblood and has inherited all of this, but he's also not as well off as some other students, and he's kind of an odd character. So what is it about these three characters? You can say Harry Potter, but really we're talking about this band of characters that kind of go on this journey together. Lauren, what do you think about these three, and what makes Harry Potter such a great character that is easy to root for?
They're the underdogs who are going up against a much, much more powerful villain. But the villain is somewhat hampered by self-interest. He's got a plan, he's got a focus, he's going to execute it, and he's going to use all of his minions as pawns, and they know it, right? So that can be a strength, but that can also be a weakness. On the other side, we've got Harry Potter. While he doesn't have a lot of strong abilities in, say, his wizard craft, he's got a lot of gumption. And he's willing to take risks. He ends up having luck on his side, but he
makes a lot of mistakes along the way.
He makes a lot of mistakes,
Yes.
but he tries. That's the
Right.
thing. Whereas Hermione does have a lot of skill. There's a lot of things she's not willing to do because she has rules. She's going to follow them, right? Unless Harry drags her into some kind of Harry and Ron drag her into some kind of situation, and she'll go with them because of love, right? The power of love. So even though these are three small students who don't have a whole lot of big, powerful magical strengths against a wizard like he who shall not be named, they still manage to defeat him through the power of love and taking those risks, and also self-sacrifice.
Agreed.
Very well said. Josh, what is it about Harry Potter that's easy to root for, other than his underdog status? Because we all like to root for an underdog. What is the it quality that he has?
Honestly, I think it's because he makes mistakes. He tries to do things for the right reasons. He tries to do his best, and sometimes his best is not good enough. Sometimes he makes the wrong decisions, and we've all been in school where we're trying to do the right thing, and you just can't do it. Or, and it really comes down to something simple, like, when you're in gym and you're playing basketball and you're really wanting to make the 3-pointer and you can't do it. And, he's not perfect. He he tries his hardest, but sometimes his hardest isn't good enough. And sometimes his good enough is a mistake. It's an accident. And I think that because of that, he's not an all-powerful superhero. He really doesn't know what he's doing. He's confused a lot of the time because of the grander thing that is going on. And honestly, the way that she crafted the story was pretty ingenious, just learning new things every year, and therefore the reader learns new things as the story goes through. You could look at Amazon right now. It's still like in the top 100 on Amazon at full price on an ebook that was published 20 years ago. I have a hard time reading it now just because there's a whole bunch of adverbs, and I read it and I'm like, you don't need any of that, JK. But hey, she makes $1 billion. She can do what she wants.
Yeah, she tells Stephen King to politely take his adverbs and do things.
Right.
Yeah, you want to create a nail-biting experience, and if the main character always gets it right, especially at the start, then the plot will go very quickly, and the book will be over. But
Kyle or
you
Keo
won't be
says
worried about it.
Neville is her favorite character. I happen to I love Neville's character. I absolutely love Neville's character.
Neville's a fantastic character. Dorothy Gale. This was an interesting character that I thought of. From Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. If there's not a gee shucks character, that is comes across in the beginning as just passive and clueless, almost. I mean, I don't mean to be just dismissive, but she is just. But at the end of her journey, at the end of the movie, she's come through a journey of self-awareness. She has come into her own power, if you will, and she has learned that the reality of the world is much different than she thought. And it's an interesting journey that this character goes through. Lauren, what are your initial thoughts about Dorothy as a lasting character?
Dorothy is the every woman, every man, every woman. Anyone is supposed to be able to put themselves in her shoes, and she represents us. And then everyone else in Wizard of Oz can be flashy and colorful and interesting. She doesn't have to be that flashy and colorful and interesting because she just stands in for the reader. And that's a kind of reassuring reminder for authors who are trying to come up with their main character in their book, and they're trying to make them flashy and colorful and really extra special. They don't have to be, right? They don't have to be. You just need a solid start and then see where that character will take you on the journey. And I think she stands out that's one of the ways that she stands out is she doesn't have to be that flashy. She can just be a simple who she is, Dorothy character that the reader can put themselves into. And then that puts the focus on this magical world around her, but also, like you're saying, a gentle character transformation that's kind of natural to the plot line and very evident by the end.
Yeah. And this is probably a better representation of a story where the supporting cast have a definite influence on her outcome, because it's through the supporting cast that she learns kind of these different stages of the story, that from the Scarecrow and from the Lion, that she learns courage and all of these different things that she ends up taking with her. So maybe this is a better representation of the team, if you will, that brings about ultimate character change.
Yeah, really simple, straightforward. You get the message, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah. What about you, Josh? You have any thoughts about Dorothy?
I've got a confession to make. The monkeys in this movie terrified me when I was a boy, and I have never watched this movie all the way through from beginning to end. Never.
So what you're saying is the Wizard of Oz is your Terminator.
Well, and like, so I tried to watch this movie and I could not, but
Yeah.
it was because I watched Chitty Chitty Bang Bang,
Okay.
and the dude with the net and the long nose that was catching the kids had nightmares about him. So
Oh,
when
yeah.
this came on, I was like, nope, I ain't doing this. I ain't watching it. So I know the story. I know what happens. Never watched it. I have never sat down and watched it from beginning to end.
That's funny. That's funny. All right, moving on. Sherlock Holmes, the
Ooh.
quintessential detective. Sherlock is always the smartest guy in the room, but inherently an odd and flawed character. But a character that has definite lasting and staying power in that we've had his stories for over 100 years. Kind of like the stories that Agatha Christie wrote, that they're still remaking movies and keeping the core of the story intact. Stories written over 100 years ago that still resonate. What is it about this character that is such a great character?
I think it's that as an escapism, I think everyone wants to be the dude that knows everything.
Yeah.
And the guy that can look at a hair and go, that hair is from an Asian gorilla on the east end of the continent, whatever, right? Like, and watching people like that work is very interesting, because it's so abnormal from what we're used to seeing in people in general. When we meet someone that's eccentric as Holmes and as knowledgeable as him, it's very interesting, and it makes us want to listen to what he has to say, just to find out what he's going to say next, because he's very charismatic. And also you have the Watson character, which is of course supposed to be our window into him explaining what he's doing.
Right.
But I think, honestly, I think it's just because how interesting Holmes is as a person, as a character, that makes everybody just want to follow him around and see what he does.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think his personality, I don't want to say disorder, but he's very much an odd character. Do you think that some of those quirky character traits play into the making him more likable and making him more relatable?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think of Harry Dresden in the Dresden Files too. The same thing. Um, he's got, different kinds of brilliance than Sherlock Holmes does, but he's another character who also has flaws that he struggles with. He's got a past that comes up. He's got current flaws and struggles, and all of them make him hilarious on the one side, and it's kind of painful as you watch some of the relationship struggles that he goes through, with his ex, and his even with his daughter, and with his friends. But then all of the strings and plot strings and threads, kind of come together at the end, and part of his personality flaws and struggles are part of how he's able to assemble the team in the final books that he's going to use to defeat or face bigger and badder enemies as he goes along. Sherlock, same thing. He's got definite struggles. If he was a simple character that just got everything right all the time, it wouldn't be as interesting to read. I don't know if we would have followed on that many episodes.
Yeah.
You kind of feel for him.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up Harry Dresden, because I meant to add a slide for Harry Dresden and I just forgot. But he might be the perfect flawed character, because there's so much wrong with that character, and yet you want to climb into his beetle with him and go solve mysteries.
Yes.
It's crazy. Jim Butcher did an amazing job of making a relatable character and someone that you just want to see him succeed, and you just know he's not, or he's kind of gonna succeed, and kind of not. There's always going to be more to come, and
Always.
yeah, that's what's fun. Next up, Lisbeth Salander from Stieg Larsson's The Girl or Millennium Trilogy, and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is where we first meet her. She is as antisocial a character as you're ever going to meet. She's the smartest girl in the room, and she just hates people. But there's something odd about the way that you just want her to succeed, and you want to uh, you want her to be on your team. I guess is one way of putting it. But this is a great example of an anti-hero or an anti-social hero, someone that they just don't like people, yet we want to be around her.
Yeah, there's protagonists who are just the main character. They don't necessarily have to be good. They're just the main character. Antagonist, person who's against them. You got a pseudo hero. That's someone who's put forward to look like the hero, but they're really not. They might even be like the villain, the actual villain of the character. She is a hero, and she does want justice, and she does want good to win out. She just sees a whole lot of darkness and evil in normal, good people and in the establishment and in the world at large. She just knows that there's a dark side behind it all, and that's what she's going after. So on the surface, it might look like she's trying to make chaos, but it's because she's trying to go after actual justice, not this fake justice that everyone else just kind of swallows down. So I'd still call her a hero, but
Yeah.
a pseudo hero would be like Satan in Paradise Lost.
Right.
At the start, he looks pretty good and glorious, but he's presented that way to fool everyone, including possibly the reader.
Right.
There's a fake hero for you.
Josh, have you read or seen the Stieg Larsson series?
I haven't read the books. I've seen the first movie twice, and I can't remember if I've seen the newer one twice or both versions once. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
The one that I have in my mind right now is the one that Daniel Craig is in, and I think that's the newer one of the films of the two versions. I really enjoyed well, it's hard to enjoy her character and the movie itself, but Lauren's right. I mean, she is a hero, but she doesn't really do hero things. She is surviving, and no one is going to get justice for her unless she does it for herself. And it's very on character with her. I mean, yes, she is antisocial, so she's not going to go to anybody for help. She's going to take care of it on her own because she can't trust anybody to do what she needs done. And I thought that was very interesting. I need to read the books because I really liked the plot, the idea, the story of the first, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And I don't know how well that follows with the novel from the movie, but I've heard that it's close-ish.
Yeah, it's close. It's as close as you can get a 2-hour movie from
right,
from
yeah,
a 500-page novel.
Right.
And last, Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. Here we have a great interplay between these two characters. One, you've got the light and the dark. You've got the protagonist and antagonist, and then as we learn in the second movie, Darth is actually Luke's father. And
Whoa! Spoilers!
Yeah, for any of y'all that have been waiting 35 years to figure that out, I just spoiled that for you. And then was it around around 2000 when the prequel trilogy came out, and we got all this backstory for Darth Vader, and we began to understand why he became the character that he became, and all of his struggles and all of that stuff. So, but taken as a whole, these two characters, you've got the father-son relationship, which is one thing, and then you've got the whole dichotomy of the light versus the dark. This was, as far as um, archetypal characters, I think George Lucas, I mean, he went straight for particular archetypes here. What do y'all think about these characters, how they're portrayed? And I'll throw a caveat here since this is our last slide. If you could do their story differently, would you? And what would you do?
I can tell you exactly what I would do.
Okay.
The prequels ruined Anakin's story, and they made the whole first movie and most of the second movie way too nice. If I was doing it, probably the first quarter of the movie of the first one would be finding him as a boy, and then the rest of the movie would be getting him to where he needs to be, like basically taking him through his youth and then into where he's doing stuff in Attack of the Clones. But building that character, building the character of Anakin so that that change that he makes when he's like, I'm just going to keep her from dying, make that more gradual, like stretch that you can broad that. Like it's like the end of Game of Thrones season 8, where Daenerys goes from wanting to help everybody and then she burns the whole town because she gets mad. I'm like, right. I could see it happening, right? Like I could see how she would get to that point, but not the way you did it. You need like 3 more seasons to like stretch out that change, because it's such a drastic flip-flop. And now you're going from hero to murdering children just because you want to save your wife. Like that's a huge.
To be fair though, if you've ever lived with a toddler, those mood swings though.
It's true. That is true. That's true.
So let me ask you this. This is a great case of you explaining away the evil too much in an effort to humanize your antagonist and to give depth to their story. Sometimes kind of washes away some of the evil, if you will, and takes the punch out of it. Sometimes evil just needs to be evil. Is this a case where we humanize the antagonist too much, or was it just done poorly?
I think it was an attempt to tell a very difficult story.
Yeah.
And when I was listening to Josh, give his ideas, and I thought
Rant.
I thought you were spot on. For me, like 1, 2, and 3 are like completely different stories from 4, 5, and 6. And I don't see a character connection between the Darth Vader in 4, 5, and 6 and 1, 2, and 3. Like they seem like different personalities. But the character arc in 4, 5, and 6 is natural and makes sense. And it reminds me of dealing with people over time. Sometimes if you've got someone in your family that you really struggle with, sometimes stepping back works as a. I mean, sometimes you need to confront people and tell people, communicate with them very clearly. But sometimes they need space to think things over. And for Darth Vader, it was just fatherhood was kind of the pull that subtly pulled him over the course of 3 movies and 3 stories to get him to have a change of heart. And it wasn't that Luke was saying, I need you to be my father. I grew up an orphan and I was abandoned or something, or I didn't have a father figure. That wasn't even true, right? He did have a father figure, but just that pull of Darth Vader seeing his son and wanting some connection just that little thing, that little seed of love ended up kind of blossoming slowly over time. And yeah, I didn't see that as I didn't see that same character in 4, 5, and 6. So I kind of just think of them as separate characters,
Right.
separate stories, and I don't know. It was a tough job, but we're all curious. We're all curious about who's this person's backstory. So they had to try.
Right.
The coolest Vader of the prequels is in Rogue One. And like
Yes.
Rogue One is by far my favorite. I'm going to get burned to the stake for this. Rogue One is my favorite Star Wars movie of all time. And because the stakes are there, the characters are there, and Vader is a badass, and the end, how it ties right into A New Hope, like expert, like so well done, like it was so great. I loved that Vader, and I would have loved to see that Vader in like episode 3. Like if we see that transition and see him become that Vader.
Well, behind me are the posters for episodes 4, 5, and 6. You'll notice there are no posters for episodes 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
I'll just leave it there.
Says it all.
I'll just leave it there.
I do have the collector's edition. You can't see it; it's way across the room. The collector's edition VHS Star Wars Episode 1 Phantom Menace box, because it's got a film cell in it, and I got it when the movie came out. So I keep that on my shelf just because it's a cool knickknack, but I don't ever watch the movie. I don't even know I have a VHS player anymore.
Oh man, one of my sons-in-law sent me a picture yesterday that he had collected all of the editions of the Lord of the Rings, including the VHSs. That
nice.
And I don't think he's ever owned a VHS player, but he has them now. So
we had a friend over a couple of weeks ago, and for some reason Titanic ended up on the TV, and we were talking about it, and I said, sorry. I love Titanic. It's a great movie. I had the gold box double cassette thing of Titanic, because the movie was so long it had to go on 2 cassettes. But I had the letterbox, the widescreen edition, and I wish I still had it. It was really cool. But yeah.
Well, that's
my nerd for you.
Well, that's when movie studios appreciated bathroom breaks, because when it was time to change that tape, you run to the bathroom before.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't get that in digital releases now. They just want you to sit through 4 hours of it. Anyway, well, that was a fun look at characters that we're all familiar with and what makes them great. I'm going to finish this week sketching out some character. I have my main protagonist. I have my the person that I know committed the crime, and then I have some law enforcement officers that are going to come in. I've got some shop owners around the little town, and I'm planting kind of red herring characters, and each of them are bringing a new character trait to the story. And some of them are for comic relief. Some of them are to throw off the reader. And I'm having so much fun coming up with these characters. So that's what I'm going to be working on this week. Josh, do you have, since this is a book 2 in a trilogy, or in the next book in your series, are there any new characters coming in, or are these characters extending the story that you've already written?
I'm doing a couple things. I am adding another POV character, but it's more of a tertiary character than a true side character, but we do get some of his chapters. I'm also doing something that I haven't ever done before, which is what I call Flash POV. There's probably an actual thing that it's called, but I don't know what that thing is. But basically, it's when you have a very brief, and I write in this series in Third Limited, so it's a very brief glimpse through a character that we've never met before, a very brief glimpse through their eyes before the main character shows up and does something to them, or talks to them. And I've never done that before, and one of my favorite authors, Mark Greaney, does that a lot in The Gray Man, and so I wanted to try to do that in this book. So it gives me kind of the opportunity to like almost quick sketch character into a very small section of the book, and I can do whatever I want with it and then forget about it. So I'm playing with that too as I kind of go through and create some new characters.
We should probably talk about character POV at some point. But I'm writing this book in first person present, which is fun. But
Interesting.
it is interesting, and it's really interesting for a mystery because you can't kind of move the camera over and
Right.
show the reader something else.
Right.
They only get to see what your POV character is seeing, which is great for hiding clues, but then you have to figure out how to put those clues in front of your POV character
100%.
the reader only gets to see what your POV character sees. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting challenge. Lauren, what about you? You are extending a universe that exists, but you're bringing some new characters into it. What are your plans for the story you're working on?
Yeah, new characters, but I'm going back to the first couple books of the series, and I'm kind of making an encyclopedia for a universe Bible for
Nice.
them, because I really enjoy, again with Jim Butcher's Harry Dresden books. I really enjoy when clues and plots from the beginning come back around and get explored deeper. So then the reader gets this rewarding feeling of having paid attention. They get a reward for that.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that myself. So I'm going to look for villains from book 1 and 2 that want revenge and payback, and I'm just going to kind of mine that a little bit more. In particular, in book 1, there was a witch's cabin that gets destroyed, and when the witch dies, she's like, "You don't know what you did. There were worlds inside my home. Worlds." And I'm like, "Oh, that is interesting. Tell me more about that." So I'm going to be finding more of those
pregnant with possibilities.
Exactly, kind of like open plot threads, and I'm going to start pulling on them. I'm already pulling on them, and we'll see what I come up with.
Love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
I love those things, by the way. Those are some of my favorite things that I find in books.
You are pregnant with possibility as well?
No. The idea of
What
finding things out in the beginning of the book that matter at the end of the book that if you were paying attention make
Yeah.
Well, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that when the reveal at the end makes you think back to all the possibilities that you went
100%.
through. That's the best. That is the absolute best. We went a little over tonight, but we were having so much fun. Next week, we're going to talk about world building and place as character. How do you develop a world and a place for your story that becomes as big as any of the characters that you come up with? Lauren, Josh, thanks as always for joining me.
Hank.
Yeah, this was fun.
Everybody keep writing.